Welcome to Silent Shadows. Today, we delve into a case that has cast a long, dark shadow for over half a century. It's a story that begins with a beloved nun, a dedicated teacher whose sudden, brutal murder in 1969 ripped through a quiet Baltimore community, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and disturbing revelations. This is the story of Sister Catherine Cesnik, but her death was not just a tragic, isolated incident. As investigators, journalists, and her own former students would eventually uncover, Sister Cathy's unsolved murder is inextricably linked to a horrifying web of secrets: allegations of widespread sexual abuse at a Catholic high school, claims of institutional cover-ups that reached into the highest echelons of power, and a chilling silence that many believe was bought with fear and perhaps with blood. For decades, the truth has remained elusive, buried under layers of denial, lost evidence, and the passage of time. Yet the echoes of this case refuse to fade. It's a mystery that has spawned books, documentaries, and countless theories, each attempting to piece together a puzzle where many crucial pieces still seem to be missing. Today on Silent Shadows, we embark on a comprehensive journey to explore the multifaceted and deeply troubling case of Sister Cathy Cesnik. We will examine her life, the circumstances of her tragic death, the dark secrets of Archbishop Keough High School, the suspects who have lived under a cloud of suspicion, the institutional responses that have drawn so much criticism, and the lingering questions that continue to demand answers. Join us as we attempt to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of this enduring enigma, seeking to understand not just what happened to Sister Cathy, but why her story continues to resonate with such profound and unsettling power. To understand the depth of the tragedy that befell Sister Catherine Cesnik and the potential motives behind her murder, we must first understand who she was. Born Catherine Ann Cesnik on November 17, 1942, in the Lawrenceville neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, she was the eldest of 4 children in a working-class family. From a young age, Cathy, as she was known, exhibited a sharp intellect and a natural capacity for leadership. She attended St. Mary's School and later St. Augustine High School, where her academic prowess shone brightly. In 1960, she graduated not only as valedictorian, but also as May Queen, president of her senior class, and president of the student council. These early accolades painted a picture of a young woman who was not just intelligent, but also popular, respected, and driven. Her sister, Marilyn Cesnik Radakovich, would later recall Cathy's vibrant personality, describing her as someone with the desire to be more, to do more. This intrinsic drive, coupled with a deep-seated faith, led Cathy at the young age of 18 to join the School Sisters of Notre Dame, a Roman Catholic religious institute dedicated to education. It was a decision that would shape the course of her tragically short life. As Sister Catherine, she dedicated herself to teaching. Her former students, particularly from Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore, where she taught English and drama in the late 1960s, remember her with a profound fondness. They describe her as more than just an educator. She was a confidant, a source of inspiration, and a beacon of kindness in what, for some, was a turbulent and confusing time. She was known for her compassion, her ability to connect with young people, and her engaging teaching style. One former student, Deb Silcox, quoted in various reports, encapsulated this sentiment, stating, "Everybody who knew her loved her." Another former nun, who knew Cathy during this period, recalled her as one of the kindest, most gentle people you would ever meet. The era in which Sister Cathy came of age as a nun was also a period of significant upheaval and transformation within the Catholic Church. The Second Vatican Council, which concluded in 1965, ushered in a wave of reforms aimed at modernizing the Church and making it more relevant to the contemporary world. This spirit of change permeated many religious orders, encouraging a more outward-looking and socially conscious approach. It's plausible that this atmosphere influenced Sister Cathy, perhaps fueling her desire, as her sister noted, to be more. She was, by all accounts, a forward-thinking individual, less bound by the rigid conventions of the past and more attuned to the evolving needs and challenges of her students and her community. In the fall of 1969, Sister Cathy embarked on a new chapter that seemed to reflect this yearning for greater independence and perhaps a different way to serve. She took a leave of absence from the School Sisters of Notre Dame, a decision that was not uncommon at the time as many in religious orders explored new paths in the wake of Vatican II. She began teaching English at Western High School, a public school in Baltimore, and moved out of the convent into an apartment in Catonsville, Maryland, which she shared with another nun, Sister Helen Russell Phillips. This move signified a step towards a more secular life, though she remained deeply committed to her faith and her vocation as an educator. It was a period of personal growth and exploration for the 26-year-old. But it's within the walls of Archbishop Keough High School, where she had previously taught, that the most critical and ominous aspect of Sister Cathy's story begins to emerge. According to the powerful and disturbing testimonies of former students, most notably Jean Hargadon Winner, later known as Jane Doe in legal proceedings, and Teresa Lancaster Jane Roe, Sister Cathy Cesnik was not just a popular teacher, she was perceived as a potential savior. These women and others would later allege horrific and systematic sexual abuse at the hands of priests at Keough, primarily the school's chaplain and guidance counselor, Father A. Joseph Maskell, and another priest, Father E. Neil Magnus. In their accounts, Sister Cathy stands out as a singular figure of hope. Jean Winner's testimony is particularly pivotal. She recalled a specific, poignant conversation in the spring of 1969 where Sister Cathy, noticing her distress, gently asked, "Are the priests hurting you?" When Winner, and presumably other girls she confided in, confirmed their fears, Sister Cathy reportedly responded with a quiet determination, "I'm going to take care of this." This alleged promise, this indication that Sister Cathy was aware of the abuse and intended to intervene, is central to the darkest theory surrounding her murder, that she was silenced before she could expose the horrors unfolding at Keough. If true, her compassion, her dedication to her students, and her courage in wanting to confront such a powerful and protected system may have ultimately signed her death warrant. She was a young woman on the cusp of a new life, a beloved teacher with a bright future, but she may also have become a dangerous witness, a keeper of secrets too terrible to be revealed. And in the shadows of a revered institution, forces may have been aligning to ensure those secrets remain buried at any cost. Sister Cathy Cesnik was more than just a name in a cold case file. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a mentor. Her life, full of promise and dedication, was brutally extinguished. But the question of why would haunt investigators, her former students, and the city of Baltimore for decades to come. The answer, many believe, lies not just in the events of a single November night, but in the dark, hidden corridors of Archbishop Keough High School, and the secrets she may have been determined to bring into the light. The evening of Friday, November 7, 1969, began like any other for Sister Cathy Cesnik. After finishing her teaching day at Western High School, she returned to the apartment she shared with Sister Helen Russell Phillips in Catonsville, a suburb of Baltimore. Later that evening, around 7:30 p.m., Cathy left the apartment with a few errands in mind. She planned to cash a paycheck at the First National Bank and then visit the Edmondson Village Shopping Center. A significant occasion was approaching. Her sister, Marilyn, was recently engaged, and Cathy intended to buy her a gift. She also stopped at Mully's Bakery in the shopping center, purchasing a box of buns, a small, ordinary detail that would later become a poignant piece of the puzzle. What happened after these routine errands remains shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts. Witnesses reportedly saw Sister Cathy in her car, a green Ford Maverick, at her apartment complex around 8:30 p.m. Her roommate, Sister Helen, would later state that Cathy had called earlier to say she was going shopping and would return. However, as the hours passed and Cathy did not come home, concern began to grow. Around 10:30 p.m., some reports indicate her car was seen parked illegally across the street from her apartment complex, an unusual occurrence. By 11 p.m., Sister Helen, increasingly worried, reached out to two priests who were friends of Cathy, Father Jerry Koob and Father Peter McKeown. The two priests arrived at the apartment complex in the early hours of Saturday, November 8th. Around 4:40 a.m., they discovered Sister Cathy's Ford Maverick. It was unlocked, muddy, and parked haphazardly, facing the wrong way on a street opposite her apartment building. Inside the car, police would later find the box of buns from Mully's Bakery on the front seat. Her purse was missing. There was no sign of Sister Cathy. The discovery of her abandoned car, under such strange circumstances, immediately signaled that something was terribly wrong. The vibrant, dependable young teacher had vanished into the cold November night. The disappearance of Sister Cathy Cesnik triggered an extensive search operation. Police, fellow nuns, students, and concerned citizens scoured the area, hoping for any clue that might lead to her whereabouts. Days turned into weeks, and the initial hope began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of dread. The community waited, anxious for news, while investigators worked to piece together the fragmented timeline of her last known movements. The fact that she was a nun, a figure generally seen as safe and respected, added another layer of shock and disbelief to her disappearance. The agonizing wait finally came to a grim end nearly 2 months later, on January 3, 1970. a hunter and his son, walking through a remote, wooded area in Lansdowne, another Baltimore suburb, stumbled upon a horrifying discovery. It was the partially decomposed body of a woman lying in what was described as an informal dumping ground or landfill. Dental records would soon confirm the devastating truth. It was Sister Catherine Cesnik. The condition of her body indicated she had been there for a considerable time, exposed to the elements. The autopsy determined that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the right temple, a skull fracture inflicted by a heavy object. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, investigators were initially unable to determine if she had been sexually assaulted. The remote location where her body was found, far from her apartment or last known whereabouts, suggested a deliberate attempt to conceal the crime, to dispose of her remains where they might never be found. Her killer or killers had gone to lengths to ensure she disappeared without a trace. The discovery of Sister Cathy's body sent shockwaves through Baltimore and beyond. The murder of a nun was almost unheard of, and the brutality of the crime amplified the community's grief and outrage. The Baltimore County Police Department launched a full-scale homicide investigation, which would remain active, at least in its initial phase, from 1970 until roughly 1977. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people, including her friends, colleagues, former students, and anyone who might have had contact with her around the time of her disappearance. Polygraph tests were administered to several individuals, including Father Jerry Keough. However, the investigation was fraught with challenges from the outset. There was a distinct lack of physical evidence at the scene where her body was found, and the nearly 2-month gap between her disappearance and the discovery of her remains meant that any potential forensic clues at her apartment or in her car had likely degraded or been contaminated. The official police theory at the time, as later outlined in public releases, was that Sister Cesnik had likely been accosted at or near her residence, forced into her car, driven to the remote dump site, assaulted, and then murdered. This theory, however, was based more on circumstantial reasoning than on hard evidence. Crucially, during this initial phase of the investigation in the 1970s, the police reportedly received no information, no calls from witnesses, nor any allegations from victims regarding sexual abuse by associates of Sister Cesnik within the Catholic Church. This meant that the primary motive theory that would later dominate the case, that she was killed to prevent her from exposing the abuse at Keough High School, was entirely unknown to the investigators at the time. Without this critical piece of context, the police were essentially searching in the dark, exploring other potential motives such as robbery gone wrong, a crime of passion by an unknown acquaintance, or a random act of violence. None of these avenues yielded a definitive suspect or a clear path to solving the crime. As the years passed with no significant breakthroughs, no arrests, and no new credible leads, the investigation into Sister Cathy Cesnik's murder gradually lost momentum. After 1977, the case, like so many unsolved homicides, became largely dormant, relegated to the cold case files. The initial flurry of activity and public attention subsided, but for those who knew and loved Sister Cathy, and for the community that had been so deeply affected by her death, the questions remained. Who had committed this heinous act and why? The trail had gone cold, but the shadow of her unsolved murder would linger, waiting for new information, new voices, and new technologies to potentially bring the truth, however horrifying, into the light. The silence surrounding her death was profound, but it was a silence that, decades later, would be shattered by explosive revelations. Archbishop Keough High School, an all-girls Catholic institution nestled in Baltimore, was meant to be a place of learning, faith, and sanctuary for the young women who walked its halls. Instead, for many, it became a landscape of fear, trauma, and unspeakable violation. The accounts that have emerged from former students paint a chilling picture of a systemic culture of sexual abuse, allegedly perpetrated and protected by clergy members who held positions of immense trust and authority. At the dark heart of these allegations stands Father Anthony Joseph Maskell. Ordained in 1965, Father Maskell arrived at Keough around 1967, serving as the school's chaplain and, critically, as a guidance counselor until 1975. This dual role provided him with unparalleled access to students, not just in a spiritual capacity, but also in a setting where young women might confide their deepest anxieties and vulnerabilities. Maskell was reportedly an intelligent man, holding a master's degree in school psychology and an advanced certificate in counseling from Johns Hopkins University. This academic background, rather than being used to support and guide his students, appears to have been weaponized, allowing him to manipulate and psychologically torment his victims with a chilling expertise. Adding another layer to his influence, Maskell also served as a police chaplain for both Baltimore City and County Police Departments, a connection that survivors and investigators believe may have afforded him a degree of protection and intimidation, making it even more difficult for victims to come forward or be believed. The timeline of allegations against Maskell is long and deeply disturbing. As early as May 1967, before his most notorious tenure at Keough began in earnest, the Archdiocese of Baltimore received a complaint from the mother of an 8th-grade altar boy, Charles Franz, alleging that Maskell had sexually abused her son. Instead of removing Maskell from ministry or reporting him to civil authorities, the Archdiocese transferred him first to Our Lady of Victory Parish, and then, catastrophically, to Archbishop Keough High School. This decision, documented in the 2023 Maryland Attorney General's report, set a horrifying precedent. The AG's report would later confirm that Archdiocese officials were aware of multiple reports concerning Maskell's inappropriate interactions with young people even before and during his assignment to Keough, yet they failed to investigate these claims adequately. Once at Keough, the alleged abuse escalated dramatically. Numerous former students, most prominently Jean Winter and Teresa Lancaster, would later come forward with harrowing accounts of systematic sexual abuse, rape, and psychological torture at the hands of Maskell, often in concert with another priest, Father E. Neil Magnus, who served as Keough's religious services director. Winter stated her abuse by Maskell and Magnus began in 1968. Lancaster described horrific incidents, including being raped by police officers on Halloween 1970, an assault she claimed was facilitated by Maskell himself. These were not isolated incidents but part of a pattern of predatory behavior that terrorized a generation of Keough students. Father Neil Magnus, who died in 1988, was deeply enmeshed in these allegations, beyond Winter's. Arduous. Winter's initial attempts to bring Maskell to justice in the early 1990s were met with institutional resistance. In 1992, after she went public with her allegations, the Archdiocese placed Maskell on leave, but in 1993, he was reinstated, with the Archdiocese claiming it couldn't corroborate her story. It was only in 1994, when Winter and Lancaster filed a $40 million lawsuit, that Maskell was permanently removed from ministry. He then fled to Ireland, where he reportedly continued to practice psychology, even with children, until his death in 2001. The lawsuit itself was ultimately dismissed due to the statute of limitations, a legal barrier that for many years protected abusers and silenced victims. The argument over repressed memories, which Winter stated began to surface in 1992, was a key factor in this dismissal, as the legal system at the time was often skeptical of such testimony. The culture of secrecy and alleged protection extended beyond Maskell. In 1975, he was finally removed from his position at Keough, not due to a proactive investigation by the Archdiocese into widespread abuse, but reportedly because a new headmistress at the school acted on complaints from parents. This suggests that even when concerns were raised, the institutional response was often slow, reactive, and insufficient. The environment at Archbishop Keough High School, as described by these survivors, was not one of spiritual guidance and academic nurturing, but one of predatory abuse, psychological manipulation, and institutional betrayal. The power imbalance between the clergy and the young students was absolute, and that power was allegedly exploited in the most horrific ways. Understanding this dark reality is crucial because it is within this crucible of terror and secrecy that Sister Cathy Cesnik lived, taught, and, many believe, found the courage to try and make a difference, a decision that may have cost her her life. The shadow of Keough is long, and it stretches directly to the unsolved murder of a nun who dared to listen. If Sister Cathy Cesnik was indeed murdered to prevent her from exposing the widespread sexual abuse at Archbishop Keough High School, as the most persistent theory suggests, then who were the individuals with the motive, means, and opportunity to carry out such a brutal silencing? Over decades, suspicion has swirled around several key figures, their names emerging from survivor testimonies, investigative efforts, and the persistent work of amateur sleuths. The evidence against them is often circumstantial, relying heavily on testimonial accounts and patterns of behavior rather than definitive forensic proof, yet the shadows they cast over this case are undeniable. At the forefront of these suspects is, undoubtedly, Father A. Joseph Maskell. As the alleged ringleader of the abuse at Keough, the motive for him to silence Sister Cathy is glaringly apparent. If Cesnik, a respected teacher, intended to report what she knew, Maskell faced the destruction of his career, public disgrace, and potential criminal charges. Jean Winter's harrowing testimony that Maskell drove her to see Sister Cathy's body and explicitly threatened her with a similar fate if she spoke out provides the most direct, albeit testimonial, link between Maskell and the murder as a deliberate act of intimidation and silencing. His documented history of manipulation, his connections within the community, including law enforcement through his role as police chaplain, and his subsequent flight to Ireland when faced with legal action in 1994, all paint a picture of a man capable of extreme measures to protect himself. The 2017 exhumation of his body yielded no DNA match to the limited evidence from the 1970 crime scene. However, police officials have consistently stated this does not exonerate him. It's plausible Maskell orchestrated the murder without being physically present, or that any forensic traces he might have left were lost to time and the elements. The sheer weight of the abuse allegations against him, coupled with Wenner's specific claim, keeps him firmly as the prime suspect in the silencing theory. Father Jerry Keough, Sister Cathy's close friend and the priest who, along with Father Peter McKeown, found her abandoned car, has also faced scrutiny, though the nature of that suspicion has evolved dramatically. Initially, his proximity to Cesnik and his involvement in the discovery of her car made him a natural person of interest for police. He reportedly passed 2 polygraph tests regarding his alibi for the night of her disappearance. He claimed to be at a movie with McKeown. However, a bizarre claim he made, featured prominently in The Keeper's documentary, that a Baltimore detective showed him Sister Cathy's private parts, severed from her body by the killer, as an intimidation tactic, raised new questions about his psychological state or his knowledge of the crime's brutality. More recently, and far more damningly, allegations surfaced in the context of the 2023 Maryland Attorney General's report accusing Keough, referred to as the Jesuit intern, of sexually assaulting and raping Keough students in the early 1970s. If these allegations are true, it places Keough not merely as a peripheral figure but potentially as part of the very abuse network Sister Cathy may have threatened to expose. This would provide him with a direct motive for her silencing, a motive previously obscured by his public persona as her grieving friend. His status as alive means he could still potentially provide answers or face accountability for these new allegations. Edgar Davidson, an alleged friend of Father Maskell, became a significant person of interest largely through the testimonies of his ex-wife, identified as Anne in some reports and Margaret in others, and his niece, Debbie Yawn. His ex-wife recounted that Davidson returned home the night Cesnik was murdered with blood on his white shirt, which he dismissed as the result of a fight. She also stated her instinctive feeling that he had committed the murder. Davidson's own behavior added to the suspicion. He admitted to calling a radio talk show years after the murder, claiming to have information about Sister Cathy's rosary, only to later retract or alter his story. While he denied involvement in The Keepers, these accounts, particularly the detail of the bloody shirt and his connection to Maskell, place him firmly in the circle of suspicion. Billy Schmidt, along with his brother Ronnie, also came under scrutiny through The Keepers, primarily due to concerns raised by family members, including his niece Sharon Schmidt and his sister-in-law Barbara Schmidt. Questions about Billy Schmidt's presence at or near Sister Cathy's apartment complex around the time of her disappearance fueled speculation about his potential involvement. While the specific nature of his alleged connection to the crime remains less defined than that of Maskell or Davidson, the persistent suspicions from those who knew him have kept his name in the conversation. Beyond these more prominent names, the case has been haunted by other shadowy figures. The man living downstairs from Cesnik, mentioned in The Keepers, remains an unidentified person of interest whose proximity to the victim warrants consideration, though little concrete information about him is publicly available. The Baltimore County Police Department has also acknowledged investigating roughly half a dozen other unnamed suspects over the years, comparing their DNA to crime scene evidence without finding a match. This suggests that the official investigation has explored avenues beyond those widely publicized. The challenge in assessing these suspects lies in the nature of the evidence. Much of it is testimonial, sometimes decades old, and subject to the frailties of memory, particularly when dealing with traumatic events or long-held family secrets. The lack of definitive forensic breakthroughs, such as a conclusive DNA match or a recovered murder weapon, means that investigators and the public are often left to connect dots based on patterns of behavior, alleged motives, and the credibility of witness accounts. The erratic behavior and unsettling claims made by some individuals, like Keough's severed body parts story or Davidson's radio call, further muddy the waters, making it difficult to discern genuine clues from misdirection or psychological disturbance. The silencing theory, if true, implies a conspiracy, or at least a coordinated effort, to murder Sister Cathy and conceal the crime. This raises the question of whether one person acted alone or if multiple individuals were involved, either in the act itself or in the subsequent cover-up. The power dynamics at play, particularly Father Maskell's alleged influence and connections, suggest he could have enlisted others to carry out such a crime. The very nature of a silencing murder points to perpetrators who believed they could act with impunity, protected by a wall of institutional secrecy or fear. The suspects in the Sister Cathy Cesnik case are not just individuals, they are figures who emerged from a deeply corrupted system, their alleged actions reflecting the darkness that system allowed to fester. Untangling their individual roles and responsibilities from the broader institutional failings remains one of an enduring and frustrating challenges of this unsolved tragedy. The murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik and the subsequent decades of investigation and advocacy cannot be separated from the responses or lack thereof from the institutions that held power and responsibility. The actions of the Archdiocese of Baltimore and the Baltimore County Police Department, in particular, have been subjected to intense scrutiny, revealing a complex interplay of official statements, conflicting accounts, and the profound impact of external pressures like media attention and legal reforms. The Archdiocese of Baltimore has, for many years, publicly maintained a stance of full cooperation with the police investigation into Sister Cathy's murder, dating back to 1969. They have asserted that they did not interfere with law enforcement efforts and have responded to inquiries, particularly those reignited by The Keepers documentary, through official statements and website FAQs. However, this narrative of transparent cooperation is sharply contested. As early as the 1990s, some police officers involved in the original investigation confided to the Baltimore Sun that church officials had, in fact, hindered their initial efforts. This claim of obstruction, or at least a lack of proactive assistance, laid an early foundation for skepticism regarding the Archdiocese's role. The most damning indictment of the Archdiocese's handling of abuse allegations, which formed the core motive in the Cesnik case, came with the April 2023 Maryland Attorney General's report. This exhaustive 4-year investigation painted a grim picture of a systemic, decades-long pattern within the Archdiocese of dismissing complaints, concealing abuse, and prioritizing the institution's reputation over the safety of children. Specifically concerning Father Maskell, the report confirmed that Archdiocese officials were aware of multiple parental reports about his inappropriate interactions with young people before and during his assignment to Keough High School in 1969. Instead of removing him or reporting him to civil authorities after an initial 1967 complaint involving an altar boy, Maskell was transferred, eventually landing at Keough. This documented failure to act on early warnings is a critical piece of the puzzle, suggesting a permissive environment that allowed Maskell's predatory behavior to continue and escalate. The Archdiocese's subsequent actions regarding Maskell, placing him on leave in 1992 after Gene Wenner's public accusations, only to reinstate him in 1993 claiming an inability to corroborate her story, and then permanently removing him in 1994 when faced with a lawsuit and further allegations, illustrate a reactive rather than proactive approach to credible claims of severe misconduct. While the Archdiocese did eventually pay financial settlements to at least 16 of Maskell's accusers, totaling over $472,000 by 2017, these payments often came long after the initial harm and in the context of legal pressure or public exposure. The decision by the Archdiocese to file for bankruptcy in the fall of 2023, following the AGS report and the passage of the Maryland Child Victims Act, is seen by many as a strategic move to manage the financial fallout from decades of alleged abuse and cover-ups. The Baltimore County Police Department's investigation into Sister Cathy's murder has been a long and winding road. Active from 1970 to 1977, it then lay dormant for many years until renewed activity in the early 1990s, spurred by the emerging abuse allegations against Maskell and advancements in DNA technology. The case was reassigned internally in 2016, leading to the significant step of exhuming Father Maskell's body in February 2017. While the DNA obtained did not match the limited forensic evidence from the 1970 crime scene, the BCOPD has consistently maintained that this does not exonerate Maskell as a suspect. They have also tested DNA from about half a dozen other unnamed suspects against the crime scene evidence, all with no matches. The crime scene DNA profile itself has yielded no hits in the National CODIS database. The BCOPD currently states the Cesnik homicide remains an open and active cold case, with their best hope for a solution now resting on living individuals coming forward with conclusive information. A reward of up to $2,000 is still offered. However, questions have also been raised about the handling of the investigation by law enforcement and prosecutorial bodies over the decades. The Commonweal magazine article's disturbing allegation of many boxes of evidence that have disappeared and a state's attorney who seemed unaccountably blasé about this critical issue points to potential mishandling of the case at a fundamental level. If evidence crucial to solving the murder was indeed lost or destroyed, it represents a catastrophic failure in the justice process. Whether these specific allegations were ever formally investigated or addressed by the authorities remains unclear from the available public record, leaving a significant cloud over the integrity of the case's early handling. The release of the Netflix docuseries, The Keepers, in May 2017 undeniably served as a watershed moment. It brought unprecedented global attention to the Cesnik case and the alleged abuse at Keough, effectively reigniting public interest and placing immense pressure on institutions. In direct response, the Baltimore City Police Department created an online submission form for related sex offenses, acknowledging the trauma resurfaced by the series. The Keepers also amplified the focus on Maskell's exhumation, contributed to legislative discussions around the statute of limitations for sexual abuse cases in Maryland, and brought new potential suspects, like Edgar Davidson and Billy Schmidt, into the public consciousness through the investigative efforts of former Keough students Gemma Hoskins and Abby Schaub. The series demonstrated the profound power of media to act as a catalyst, forcing renewed scrutiny and, in some instances, tangible actions from previously unresponsive institutions. The Maryland Attorney General's report in 2023 provided a crucial, official validation of the systemic abuse that survivors had described for decades. By identifying 156 clergy and employees credibly accused of abusing over 600 known victims, and detailing the Archdiocese's historical pattern of cover-up, the report fundamentally shifted the narrative from contested allegations to documented institutional failure. Its findings that the Archdiocese knew of concerns about Maskell before his Keough assignment directly corroborated a key element of the theory that Sister Cathy was murdered for threatening to expose an already compromised individual and a deeply flawed system. The AG report, combined with the new Maryland Child Victims Act, has created fresh legal avenues for survivors, further underscoring the ongoing legal and social repercussions of the events that transpired over half a century ago. The pattern of institutional responses in the Cesnik case often appears to be one of reaction rather than proaction. Significant investigative steps or acknowledgments have frequently followed external pressures, lawsuits, media expos like The Keepers, or damning official reports. This suggests a historical reluctance to confront the darkest aspects of this case without such compelling catalysts, a reluctance that has undoubtedly prolonged the suffering of victims and delayed the pursuit of justice for Sister Cathy Cesnik. The interplay between survivor activism, investigative journalism, and, eventually, official inquiries has been crucial in preventing this case from fading into complete obscurity. The unsolved murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik is not an isolated tragedy. Its shadow extends to other violent deaths of young women in the Baltimore area around the same period, creating a disturbing constellation of unresolved cases. While direct, evidence-based connections remain elusive in some instances, the temporal and geographical proximity, along with similarities in victim profiles and circumstances, have fueled decades of speculation about potential links, serial predators, or even a wider network of criminality. The case most persistently and compellingly linked to Sister Cathy's is that of Joyce Malecki. A 20-year-old clerical worker, Malecki disappeared on November 11, 1969, a mere 4 days after Cesnik vanished. Like Cesnik, she was last seen after a shopping trip, in her case at the Herondale Mall. Her body was discovered 2 days later, on November 13, in the Little Patuxent River on the grounds of Fort Meade. The brutality was stark. She had been sexually assaulted, bludgeoned, stabbed multiple times in the neck, and ultimately strangled, her hands bound behind her back. Skin and flesh scrapings found under her fingernails indicated a desperate struggle. The similarities are chilling. Both young women, of similar build, disappeared after shopping, their cars found with keys in the ignition. Perhaps the most potent point of connection is Jean Wenner's allegation that Father Maskell drove her to a wooded area near Fort Meade, the same military reservation where Malecki's body was found, to show her Sister Cathy's body as a threat. Furthermore, the Malecki family had attended a Catholic church where Maskell served, and they lived near the St. Clement Rectory during his time there, suggesting potential prior contact. The FBI, which has jurisdiction due to the body being found on federal property, exhumed Malecki's remains in December 2023, hoping to extract viable DNA. This renewed focus, potentially spurred by the attention from The Keepers and advances in forensic science, offers a glimmer of hope for answers in Malecki's case, and perhaps, by extension, new insights into Cesnik's. However, the Malecki family has also reported being told years ago by the FBI that all physical evidence in her case had been destroyed, a claim that, if true, would be a devastating blow to the investigation. Another case often mentioned in the same breath is that of Pamela Lynn Conyers. 16-year-old Conyers disappeared on October 16, 1970, also from the Herondale Mall. Her body was found 4 days later. She had been strangled. For over 50 years, her murder remained unsolved. However, in a significant breakthrough in March 2023, Arundel County Police, with FBI assistance, announced they had solved Conyers' murder using advanced DNA technology and investigative genetic genealogy. The primary suspect was identified as Forrest Clyde Williams III, who was 21 at the time and had died in 2018. A second deceased suspect, Donald Willard, was also identified. Authorities stated there was no evidence Conyers knew her attackers, and, crucially, no evidence linking Williams to the Cesnik or Malecki murders. While this development didn't directly solve the other cases, the successful application of cutting-edge forensic techniques in a contemporaneous local murder provided a blueprint and perhaps renewed impetus for investigators in the Malecki and Cesnik cases. The third young woman in this tragic cluster is 16-year-old Grace Elizabeth Gay Montagnier. She was last seen on September 29, 1971, after reportedly meeting a stranger at a Reisterstown shopping center. Her body was found later that same day in South Baltimore. The Baltimore County Police Department has noted her case as one of 3 similar unsolved murders, alongside Malecki and Conyers, that were explored for possible connections to Cesnik's death. The similarities are primarily circumstantial: young, attractive female victims who disappeared from or near shopping centers in the Baltimore area within a relatively short time frame. However, specific evidence definitively linking Montagnier's murder to the others has not been publicly detailed. The existence of these parallel tragedies has naturally led to theories of a serial predator operating in the region during the late 1960s and early 1970s. While the solving of the Conyers case pointed to specific individuals not previously linked to the other murders, it doesn't entirely rule out the possibility that other, separate predators were active, or that a more complex network of individuals was involved in some of these crimes. The alleged involvement of multiple individuals in the abuse at Keough, including potentially police officers, opens the door to even darker possibilities of interconnected criminality that might extend beyond the school's walls. More than 5 decades on, the quest for truth in Sister Cathy Cesnik's murder is inseparable from the lingering shadows of these other unsolved or only recently solved cases. Each piece of new information, each forensic advance, carries the potential not only to bring closure to one family but to illuminate the broader landscape of violence and fear that gripped the Baltimore area during that time. The critical unanswered questions persist. Was there a common perpetrator? Was there a wider conspiracy that connected some or all of these deaths? Or were these tragic, separate events that coincidentally shared disturbing similarities? The path forward in the Cesnik case, and potentially in understanding its relationship to these other tragedies, remains challenging. The Baltimore County Police Department maintains that the Cesnik homicide is an open and active cold case. Their stated best hope lies with living individuals who possess conclusive information choosing to come forward. The reward of up to $2,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction still stands. Yet, the passage of time, the death of key figures like Father Maskell, and the alleged disappearance of crucial evidence present formidable obstacles. The specific, nagging inconsistencies and unanswered questions continue to fuel speculation. Jean Wenner's powerful testimony about being shown Sister Cathy's body, while central to the silencing theory, has faced scrutiny, particularly regarding the complexities of repressed memories in a legal context. The full story behind Father Jerry Coubb's bizarre claim of being shown severed body parts by a detective remains unclarified and deeply unsettling. The true identity of Brother Bob, the alleged accomplice of Maskell, is still unknown, and the allegations of missing evidence and prosecutorial indifference, if substantiated, point to a profound betrayal of the pursuit of justice. Despite these challenges, avenues for progress remain. Continued law enforcement commitment is paramount. The application of advanced forensic techniques, like genetic genealogy, offers hope, provided viable DNA evidence can still be leveraged. The ongoing FBI investigation into Joyce Malecki's murder, following her 2023 exhumation, could yield critical new leads. Perhaps most importantly, the societal shift in understanding and addressing institutional abuse, bolstered by legal reforms like the Maryland Child Victims Act, may empower more witnesses or even peripheral figures involved in these decades-old events to finally break their silence. The unwavering dedication of survivors, amateur investigators, and journalists continues to be a powerful force, ensuring that Sister Cathy Cesnik and the dark secrets surrounding her death are not forgotten. The unsettling legacy of this silent sister demands nothing less than a relentless pursuit of the truth, however long and difficult that path may be. The murder of Sister Cathy Cesnik is far more than an unsolved statistic in a cold case file. It is a profound tragedy that ripped through a community, silenced a voice of compassion, and exposed a horrifying underbelly of abuse and institutional betrayal that has cast a shadow for over half a century. Her life, full of promise and dedication to her students, was brutally extinguished, allegedly because she dared to confront the darkness she had uncovered. The weight of evidence, primarily through the courageous testimonies of survivors like Jean Winter and Teresa Lancaster, points overwhelmingly towards the theory that Sister Cathy was murdered to prevent her from exposing the systemic sexual abuse perpetrated by Father E, Joseph Maskell, and others within the confines of Archbishop Keough High School. Her alleged promise to take care of this, a testament to her courage and empathy, may have sealed her fate, making her a target for those desperate to maintain their secrets and their power. The institutional responses, particularly from the Archdiocese of Baltimore, have been characterized by decades of what many perceive as denial, deflection, and a prioritization of reputation over justice and the well-being of victims. The 2023 Maryland Attorney General's report provided a damning, official indictment of this historical pattern of cover-up, validating the long-held claims of survivors and underscoring the toxic environment in which Sister Cathy lived and worked. While the Archdiocese has made financial settlements and issued apologies in recent years, for many, these actions fall short of full accountability for the decades of suffering and the potential obstruction of justice in Cesnik's murder. The investigation by law enforcement, while persistent in its open and active status, has been hampered by a lack of early awareness of the abuse allegations, the passage of time, the death of key suspects like Maskell, and troubling questions about missing evidence. Forensic breakthroughs have been limited, and the case continues to rely heavily on the hope that individuals with direct knowledge will finally come forward. The enduring legacy of Sister Cathy Cesnik is a complex tapestry woven with threads of tragedy, courage, institutional failure, and the unyielding human desire for truth. Her story serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences when power is abused and when those entrusted with protection become perpetrators. It highlights the immense bravery of survivors who, despite trauma and intimidation, have fought for decades to have their voices heard and to seek justice not only for themselves, but for the teacher who may have died trying to protect them. The interconnectedness of her case with other unsolved murders of young women in the Baltimore area during that era adds another layer of unresolved horror, hinting at a broader darkness that has yet to be fully illuminated. While definitive answers in Sister Cathy's murder remain elusive, the pursuit of truth continues, fueled by the dedication of her former students, investigative journalists, documentary filmmakers, and a public that refuses to let her story fade. The shadows of this case are long and deep, but the unwavering commitment to shedding light on them offers the best hope that one day, the full story of what happened to Sister Cathy Cesnik and why will finally be told, and some measure of justice, however delayed, may finally be achieved. Thank you for joining us on Silent Shadows. If you have any information regarding the murder of Sister Catherine Cesnik, please contact the Baltimore County Police Department. Subscribe for more in-depth true crime documentaries as we continue to shed light on the darkest corners of justice, one story at a time.